To keep food safe, it's incredibly important for managers to understand how pathogens and other contaminants can make food unsafe. Where these things come from and how to avoid them are the foundation for any food safety system. So, we're going to go over how contamination happens, and then we'll take a look at some specific contaminants like bacteria and viruses, parasites, fungi, and biological toxins, and chemical and physical contaminants. And then we'll talk about how to deal with the deliberate contamination of food, dealing with foodborne illness outbreaks, and finally, food allergens. The real key is for managers to understand these dangers and to help their staff avoid them. Sometimes it doesn't always work out. Take a look. 16 guests and 3 catering hall staff got sick with Shigella SPP. The guests were part of a group of National Guard veterans at a reunion who ate at a large catering hall in the southeastern United States. Within 3 days after the catered event, reports began to come into the local regulatory authority, and those who had gotten sick reported very similar symptoms. Each had experienced stomach cramps, fever, and diarrhea. 3 people went to the emergency room to seek treatment. The specific food involved was never determined, but the regulatory authority confirmed that the outbreak was likely caused by the catering hall's lead cook. He was not feeling well the morning of the luncheon when he reported to work. He also had failed to wash his hands many times during his morning shift when he prepped the food that was served at the luncheon. The catering hall's owners and management team worked with the local regulatory authority to change procedures about staff illnesses. They also started an aggressive training program that focused on correct hand washing. That's a nasty example of what can happen when staff members don't fully understand what can be done to reduce foodborne illness. One of the most important jobs for food service managers is to prevent any type of contamination of food. When I say contamination, I'm talking about the presence of harmful substances in food. Biological, chemical, and physical substances can all cause problems. Most contaminants cause foodborne illness, while some others can cause physical injury. Any idea where contaminants come from? Well, pretty much everywhere. Air, dirt, contaminated water, and the animals we use for food are all culprits. Some physical hazards occur naturally in food, such as bones and fillets or fruit pits. Sometimes food is even contaminated on purpose, but most of the time it's accidental. In fact, most contaminants get into food and onto food contact surfaces because of the way that people handle them. So, for example, think about food handlers who don't wash their hands after using the restroom. They may have feces on their fingers. Gross. If the food handler then touches food with dirty fingers and somebody eats that food, a foodborne illness can happen. This is called the fecal-oral route of contamination.
Oh!
Okay, I have a question for you. Can contamination be passed directly from person to person? You bet it can. Contaminants can easily be passed from one person to another. Food handlers can also pass on contaminants when they're in contact with someone who's sick. But it's not the only way contamination can happen.
If a person touches dirty food contact surfaces or equipment and then touches food, that food could be contaminated. And I hope this is obvious. Food and food contact surfaces can also be contaminated if someone sneezes or vomits on them. But it doesn't need to be that blatant. Even simple mistakes can cause contamination, like letting ready-to-eat food touch a food contact surface that's been in contact with raw meat, seafood, or poultry. And storing food incorrectly or cleaning produce incorrectly can also cause contamination. Even failing to spot signs of a pest infestation can lead to contamination, because pests are a major source of disease.
A really common danger that we all need to be aware of is biological contamination. It's a pretty broad term that covers everything from some fungi to bacteria and viruses.
Microorganisms are small living organisms that can be seen only through a microscope. And trust me when I say they're not as cute as these little guys in the drawing. These forms of life are everywhere. Many are harmless, but some, called pathogens, cause illness. Some pathogens make you sick when you eat them. And some of them produce a toxin or poison in the food, and eating that toxin can make you sick. There are 4 types of pathogens that can contaminate food and cause foodborne illness: bacteria, viruses, parasites, and fungi. When I say fungi, that includes things like molds and yeast. If you want to keep food safe, you need to understand how these things can cause foodborne illness. The Food and Drug Administration, otherwise known as the FDA, says that there are more than 40 different kinds of bacteria, viruses, parasites, and molds that can occur in food and cause a foodborne illness. And the FDA has singled out 6 of these, called the Big 6, because they're highly contagious and can cause severe illness.
The Big 6 include Shigella spp, Salmonella typhi, non-typhoidal salmonella or NTS, Shiga toxin-producing Escherichia coli, which is also called STEC, or more commonly, E. coli, plus hepatitis A and norovirus. Let's see what you already know. Take a look at this list of symptoms. Click the ones that you think are common symptoms of foodborne illness. When you're done, click the Am I Right button to see how you did. It turns out that diarrhea, vomiting, fever, nausea, abdominal cramps, and jaundice, which is a yellowing of the skin and eyes, are all common symptoms of foodborne illness. Not every person who is sick with a foodborne illness will have all of the common symptoms. In fact, they may even have other symptoms. How quickly foodborne illness symptoms appear in a person is known as the onset time of the illness. Onset times depend on the type of foodborne illness a person has. They can range from 30 minutes to as long as 6 weeks. How severe the illness is can also vary from mild diarrhea to death. All right, let's back up a little bit from the symptoms of foodborne illness to one of the things that causes those symptoms, bacteria. This is one of the most important things to understand if we're going to keep food safe.
Let's start with the big picture. The bacteria that cause foodborne illness have some basic characteristics. For starters, they can be found almost everywhere, including in and on our bodies. Some types of bacteria keep us healthy, while others cause illness. Unfortunately, they're not that easy to spot. In fact, bacteria cannot be seen, smelled, or tasted. Under the right conditions, bacteria will grow rapidly. The most important way to prevent bacteria from causing a foodborne illness is to control time and temperature.
Question for you. Do bacteria prefer a particular kind of food over others? Yep, that's right. Of course, most bacteria need nutrients to survive. But when it comes to what bacteria prefer, TCS food supports the growth of bacteria better than other types of food. Next question. Do bacteria grow well in food that's highly acidic? Acidity is measured by pH, and the scale ranges from 0 up to 14. A value of 0 is highly acidic, and a value of 14 is highly alkaline. And right in the middle, 7, is neutral. Bacteria grow best in food that is neutral to slightly acidic. Next one. Which temperature range is best for the growth of bacteria? You got it. That's the range where bacteria grow. Bacteria grow rapidly between 41 degrees Fahrenheit and 135 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees Celsius and 57 degrees Celsius. This range is known as the temperature danger zone. And bacteria grow even more rapidly when the temperature is between 70 degrees Fahrenheit and 125 degrees Fahrenheit, 21 degrees Celsius and 52 degrees Celsius. Want to keep TCS food safe? Keep it out of the temperature danger zone. Bacterial growth is limited when food is held either above or below this range. Another question for you. Can time affect how much bacteria grow? You bet it does. Like most things, bacteria need time to grow. In fact, the more time bacteria spend in the temperature danger zone, the more opportunity they have to grow to unsafe levels. And that's what we want to avoid. Obviously, oxygen is critically important to people. The question is, do bacteria require oxygen to grow? That's right. It depends on the bacteria. You see, some bacteria need oxygen to grow. But there are other kinds of bacteria that grow well in places where there's no oxygen at all. It depends on which kind of bacteria you're dealing with. Okay, last one. Does the amount of moisture available impact the growth of bacteria? Yep, it sure does. Bacteria grow well in food with high levels of moisture. The amount of moisture available in food for this growth is called water activity. That's written with an A with a little subscript W under it, AW. The water activity scale ranges from 0 to 1.0. The higher the value, the more available moisture in the food. Want to guess what has a water activity of 1.0? Yep, it's water. So the 6 conditions that affect the growth of bacteria are food, acidity, temperature, time, oxygen, and moisture. Want a trick to remember them all? Think of the words Fat Tom. You can help keep food safe by controlling Fat Tom. Now, in your operation, you'll most likely be able to control only time and temperature. To control temperature, do your best to keep TCS food out of the temperature danger zone, or TDZ. And to control time, you must limit how long food spends in the temperature danger zone. Okay? So that's a broad overview of bacteria in general. Now let's take a look at some specific bacteria and how to keep food safe from them. Now lots of bacteria can cause a foodborne illness, but the FDA has identified 4 in particular that are highly contagious and can cause severe illness. They are Salmonella typhi, non-typhoidal salmonella, or NTS, Shigella spp, and Shiga toxin-producing E. coli, or STEC. It's important to know that food handlers who have been diagnosed with illness from these bacteria can never work in a food service operation while they're sick. Let's take a closer look. First up, we've got Salmonella typhi, which only lives in humans. Ever heard of typhoid fever? Well, people who have it carry this bacteria in their bloodstream and intestinal tract. One of the things that makes Salmonella typhi so dangerous is that eating only a small amount of these bacteria can make a person sick. When people do get sick, the severity of the symptoms depends on the health of the person and the amount of bacteria eaten. One more fun fact. The bacteria are often in a person's feces for weeks after symptoms have ended. Both ready-to-eat food and beverages have been linked to Salmonella typhi. So the question is, what can you do to prevent it? Well, the first thing you need to do is exclude food handlers who have been diagnosed with Salmonella typhi from the operation. If they've got it, they shouldn't be at work. Also, remember that thing about the bacteria being in the feces of infected people? Well, washing hands will go a long way toward preventing more infections. And so will making sure that all food is cooked to its required minimum internal temperature.
Now let's talk about non-typhoidal salmonella. A lot of farm animals carry it naturally. And tell me if these next few lines sound familiar. Eating only a small amount of these bacteria can make a person sick. And the severity of symptoms depends on the health of the person and the amount of bacteria eaten. The bacteria are often in a person's feces for weeks after symptoms have ended. Non-typhoidal salmonella has been linked to a number of food items, but especially to poultry and eggs, meat, milk, and dairy products, and also to produce like tomatoes, peppers, and cantaloupe. If you want to prevent non-typhoidal salmonella, and I'm guessing you do, make sure that your staff cook poultry and eggs to their required minimum internal temperatures, and prevent cross-contamination between poultry and ready-to-eat food. If any of your food handlers are vomiting or have diarrhea, and they've been diagnosed with an illness from non-typhoidal salmonella, keep them out of the operation.
Okay, next one. Shigella SPP is found in the feces of people who have the illness. Most of the time, people get sick with this bacteria when they eat or drink contaminated food or water. Also, flies can transfer the bacteria from feces to food. Yuck, picture that. And high levels of the bacteria can be found in a person's feces for weeks after their symptoms have ended. As with all of these contagious bacteria that we're talking about, eating only a small amount of them can make people sick. Food that is easily contaminated by hands, like a salad containing TCS food, has been linked to Shigella SPP. It also includes stuff like potato, tuna, shrimp, macaroni, and chicken salad. It's also been linked to food that has made contact with contaminated water, such as produce. We know that contaminated hands and flies can spread these bacteria, so the prevention measures probably won't surprise you. First, exclude from the operation any food handlers who have been diagnosed with an illness caused by Shigella SPP. Also, make sure hands are washed and control flies both inside and outside the operation.
This last bacteria is one that most people have heard of, E. coli. Its complete technical name is Shiga toxin-producing Escherichia coli, or STEC, and it can be found in the intestines of cattle. It's also found in infected people. The bacteria can contaminate meat during slaughtering, and eating only a small amount of the bacteria can make a person sick. Once a person eats this bacteria, it produces toxins in the intestines, and it's actually those toxins that cause the illness. The bacteria are often in a person's feces for weeks after symptoms have ended. Raw or undercooked ground beef has been associated with E. coli, and so has contaminated produce. To keep guests in your operation safe from Shiga toxin-producing E. coli, exclude any food handlers who have diarrhea and have been diagnosed with a disease from the bacteria. Also, cook food to its required minimum internal temperature, especially ground beef. Other steps you can take include making sure that you purchase produce from approved, reputable suppliers. And finally, prevent cross-contamination between raw meat and ready-to-eat food. And that's the last of our 4 bacteria. All right, question time. Which food is commonly linked with Salmonella typhi? That's right. Salmonella typhi only lives in humans, and it's commonly linked with ready-to-eat food. That's why hand washing is so important in the prevention of Salmonella typhi. Next one. Which food is commonly linked with non-typhoidal Salmonella? You got it. Non-typhoidal Salmonella is carried by many farm animals and is commonly linked with poultry. That's why cooking poultry correctly is an important way to prevent non-typhoidal Salmonella. Take a look at these options. Which is an important way to prevent Shigella SPP? Yep, flies can transfer Shigella species from feces to food. So controlling flies is one important way to prevent disease caused by this bacteria. Which is an important way to prevent E. coli? You are correct. Shiga toxin-producing E. coli is found in the intestines of cattle, and cooking ground beef correctly is one important way to stop it. Nice work.
Viruses and bacteria can both be pathogens, but they aren't exactly the same thing. Let's look at the basics that you'll need to make sure you keep your guests safe from viruses. Here's the big picture on viruses. If you want to find a virus, look at human beings and animals, because viruses require a living host to grow. They don't actually grow in food, but they can be transferred through food and still remain infectious. And people can get viruses from food, water, or any contaminated surface. The unpleasant truth is that foodborne illnesses from viruses typically occur through fecal-oral routes. Yuck. And once viruses get onto food, like if someone forgot to wash their hands after using the restroom, they aren't destroyed by normal cooking temperatures. That's why it's important to practice good personal hygiene when handling food and food contact surfaces. And here's some disturbing information. One of the leading causes of foodborne illness is norovirus, which is often spread through, wait for it, airborne vomit particles. So, the quick removal and cleanup of vomit is also important to protect guests and staff from viruses. You may already know about which viruses to look out for. Let's find out. If a food handler at your operation tells you that they've been diagnosed with hepatitis A, what should you do? That's absolutely right. The FDA has identified hepatitis A and also norovirus as being particularly contagious, and they can cause severe illness. So, if a food handler has been diagnosed with either of these, they should not work in a food service operation while they're sick. So, obviously, norovirus and hepatitis A are two viruses that we need to understand. Let's get to know them a little better.
Hello, I'm a virus. My full name is hepatitis A, but some people call me Hep or Hep A. What to say? I'm not bragging or anything, but most people have heard of me, so that's pretty nice. Where do I hang out? Well, I mean, it's not the most glamorous of places, but poop. I hang out in the poop of people infected with, well, you guessed it, hepatitis A. Yeah, listen, it's not for everyone, but I like it. I make a good life there. I love it. Sometimes I will chill in like contaminated water or something, but no, mostly it's poop. If I get the chance, it's poop. Or feces. I do like to move around. I kind of have the wanderlust. It keeps things interesting. Now let's say I'm living in somebody's feces, which I do, and I love to do. And again, I'm not bragging, but I can infect someone for up to weeks, and they don't even show any symptoms. And then I'm like, surprise! There's a party in your body. It's called hepatitis A. And yeah, they are like super infectious the whole time. Anyway, if I'm really lucky, the person infected works in like a restaurant or something, and that makes things really easy for me to get out there and explore. And the deal is, if one of those food service guys, if they use the restroom and then they don't wash their hands, hello, they've got the old poop on the fingers. They touch some ready-to-eat food or some equipment, and I am off to the races. Whoever eats that food, I just move right in and get comfortable. Another way I like to keep things interesting, sometimes, if I'm bored or something, I'll hitch a ride on like some shellfish from contaminated water. Oh, it's so good. It's a beautiful trip. If you can take it, I recommend it. What you do is you get on like a raw oyster for someone to eat. Boom! I'm home, baby. So yeah. Ready-to-eat food or shellfish from contaminated water, they both work. Hey, can we talk about something serious for a second? I do not care for the word contaminated, actually. One man's contaminated is another virus's home. I mean, am I right? I feel right about this. Well, yeah, people do all kinds of stuff to keep me out. Listen, I get it. We can't all be loved by everyone, right? The biggest way to keep me out is if a food handler has been diagnosed with Hep A, this guy, then they just don't let him into the restaurant or whatever. It's rude, if you ask me. But there you go. Sometimes, when people are infected with Hep A, is it weird that I keep talking about myself in the third person? Nah, okay. So, people are infected with Hep A, I turn their skin kind of yellow. Personally, I love it, but it's kind of an easy giveaway. So, restaurant managers, they exclude the jaundicey folks from working. It doesn't make things easy on me, I'll tell you that much. Oh, and then there's the hand washing. Oh, they love the hand washing. But listen, hand washing is not good for me. What does it do for me? My favorite is when people are all like, oh, cook it, kill it with fire. Knock yourself out. Guess what? It don't work on me. I'm not actually bothered by regular cooking temps. Sorry. Nice try, though. Yeah, so avoiding bare hand contact with ready-to-eat food or only purchasing shellfish from approved suppliers? Yeah, that actually works. I mean, hey, you win some, you lose some. Am I right? Am I right? Yeah, you get it. How you doing? My name is Hepatitis A, and I'm a virus.
When I say Noro, you say virus. Noro. Did I just see Hep A? That guy, huh? Yeah, he's a pretty big deal. Nice virus, though, don't get me wrong. My name is Norovirus. You can call me Noro. And you can probably guess I'm a virus, like Hep A. Actually, I see that guy a lot. We share a lot of the same passions. We both live in feces. We both like to spread around on ready-to-eat food and also shellfish from contaminated water for variety. I mean, everybody likes to think we're each so unique, but we actually have a lot in common. Mostly I'm linked with the ready-to-eat food. Love it! Yes, people are always comparing us. I mean, okay, just like Hep A, I do get around by moving from poopy fingers to food and equipment. It's convenient. And yes, you only need to eat a tiny bit of me to get sick, but I mean, I still do my own thing. Like, I can hang out in someone's feces even after their symptoms are gone. For days. What makes me special? I'd have to say speed. I move fast. Once someone has a case of the old norovirus, they become contagious real fast. Like, within a few hours after eating contaminated food, they can be contagious. And I am seriously contagious. Pretty cool, right? Jaundice? No. That's Hefe's thing. He's into turning people yellow. Not for me. I'm not judging. It's just like not my thing. Now, vomiting, on the other hand, yes, I do like to cause vomiting. Love it, actually. Keeping me out of like restaurants and things. Did Hep go over this already? I mean, basically the same. Managers exclude staff who have been diagnosed with norovirus. And they have diarrhea. Same deal if they're vomiting. They don't let them work. Obviously, the hand washing and like the other stuff, not touching ready-to-eat food with bare hands, getting shellfish from approved suppliers, blah, 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 blah. Hang on. I think I'm gonna puke. Wait. Nah, I'm just kidding. I could definitely make you puke though. No, seriously, I could. No, you? Okay, come here. My name is norovirus, and I am a virus.
Okay, let's see if you remember all of that. Which virus is associated with both ready-to-eat food and shellfish from contaminated water? Yep, you got it. Both hepatitis A and norovirus are associated with ready-to-eat food and shellfish from contaminated water. True or false? Norovirus is found in the feces of people who are infected with the virus. You are correct. Norovirus is found in the feces of people who are infected with the virus, and it can be in there for days, even after symptoms have ended. True or false? Norovirus can be spread through vomit in the air. Yes, it's true. Norovirus can be spread by airborne vomit particles. That's why the quick removal and cleanup of vomit is so important to protect guests and staff from viruses.
Time to talk about a few of the hazards that sometimes get a little bit less attention than viruses. There are other biological threats out there, including parasites, fungi, and biological toxins. There are a lot of different kinds of parasites, but they share some basic characteristics. For one thing, they need a host to live in and reproduce. They live inside of other things, and that's why they're commonly associated with seafood and wild game. But they can also be found on food that's been processed with contaminated water, such as produce. To prevent foodborne illnesses from parasites, the most important thing you can do is to purchase food from approved, reputable suppliers. And cooking food to required minimum internal temperatures is also important. If your operation serves fish raw or undercooked, make sure that the fish was correctly frozen by the manufacturer. Now, fungi include yeasts, molds, and mushrooms. Some molds and mushrooms produce toxins that cause foodborne illness, so you must throw out all moldy food unless the mold is a natural part of the food, like in blue cheese. Also, you need to pay attention to mushrooms. Because harmful mushrooms are difficult to recognize, you need to purchase all mushrooms from approved, reputable suppliers. Most foodborne illness are caused by pathogens, which are one form of biological contamination. But restaurant and food service managers also need to be aware of biological toxins or poisons that can also make people sick. Question: Can food become contaminated with biological toxins from an external source? Yes, it sure can. I'll give you an example. Shellfish, like oysters, can be contaminated when they eat marine algae that contains a toxin. The toxin starts in the algae, then it gets into the oyster, then a person eats the oyster and is made sick by the toxin. The same thing can happen with fish. There's a toxin called ciguaterotoxin that can be found in small fish. When those fish are eaten by larger fish, the ciguaterotoxin gets into the big fish. And it's been found in barracuda, snapper, grouper, and amberjack. But there are other ways that food can end up with toxins. Take histamine, which is a toxin that is produced by pathogens on fish that's been time temperature abused. This can occur in tuna, bonito, mackerel, and mahi-mahi. Not all toxins come from external sources, though. Sometimes toxins are just naturally associated with certain plants, mushrooms, and seafood. Many types of illnesses can occur from eating seafood toxins. Each of these has specific symptoms and onset times. In general, though, people will experience an illness within minutes of eating the toxin. Depending on the illness, symptoms can include diarrhea or vomiting, and neurological symptoms may also appear. This includes things like tingling in the extremities and the reversal of hot and cold sensations. People may also experience flushing of the face, difficulty breathing, burning in the mouth, heart palpitations, and hives. Sounds pretty bad, right? So how do you prevent illness from biological toxins? Well, first, you need to know that toxins cannot be destroyed by cooking or freezing. The most important way to prevent a foodborne illness is to purchase plants, mushrooms, and seafood from approved, reputable suppliers. It's also important to control time and temperature when handling raw fish. Biological contaminants aren't the only dangers we need to watch out for. Lots of people have gotten sick after consuming food and beverages contaminated with food service chemicals, or after biting into something that shouldn't have been in their food. But don't worry, the guidelines for preventing these dangers are pretty straightforward.
Chemicals can contaminate food if they are used or stored incorrectly. Cleaners, sanitizers, polishes, machine lubricants, and pesticides can all be a risk. And so can deodorizers, first aid products, and health and beauty products like hand lotions and hairsprays. Plus, certain types of kitchenware and equipment can also be a risk for chemical contamination. This includes things made from pewter, copper, zinc, and some types of painted pottery. These materials are not always safe for food and can cause contamination. This is especially true when acidic food like tomato sauce is held in them.
Symptoms from chemical contaminants vary depending on which chemical was consumed. Most illnesses occur within minutes. Vomiting and diarrhea are typical. If an illness is suspected, call the emergency number in your area and the poison control number. The chemicals that you use in your operation must be approved for use in a food service operation, and they must also be necessary for the maintenance of the facility. To protect food and food contact surfaces from contamination, first make sure that you purchase chemicals from approved reputable suppliers, and store chemicals away from prep areas, food storage areas, and service areas. Chemicals need to be separated from food and food contact surfaces by spacing or partitioning. Also, make sure that your staff know that chemicals must never be stored above food or food contact surfaces. Now, this is common sense, but you should only use chemicals for what they were made to do. And always follow the manufacturer's directions, which you'll usually find on the label. Just so you know, those labels on the original container have to be readable. If not, talk to your supplier. Finally, when handling food, only use equipment and utensils that are approved for food service use. Hey, let's not forget about physical contaminants. Food can become contaminated when objects get into it. Think about what it would be like to find a piece of broken glass in your drink. Ugh. But that's not the only danger. Some physical hazards occur naturally in food, such as bones and fillets or fruit pits. Other kinds of physical objects become a hazard when they fall into food. Examples include glass, metal shavings from cans, staples, dirt, jewelry, wood, fingernails, and bandages. Ugh, just thinking about it makes me feel a little sick. The injuries caused by these contaminants can range from mild to fatal and include things like cuts, dental damage, and choking. Bleeding and pain may be the most common outward symptoms. To prevent physical contamination, be sure to only purchase food from approved, reputable suppliers and closely inspect the food you receive. Take steps to make sure no physical contaminants can get into the food. This includes making sure that food handlers practice good personal hygiene. Okay, we've gone over lots of ways to make sure that food doesn't get accidentally contaminated. But there are also steps you need to take to stop people who are actually trying to contaminate food on purpose.
Take a look at this list. Click the ones that you think are potential threats for deliberate contamination of food. When you're done, click the Am I Correct button. It's all of them. Terrorists, activists, disgruntled current or former staff, vendors, and competitors are all potential threats for deliberate contamination. These people may try to tamper with your food using biological, chemical, or physical contaminants. They may even use radioactive materials. While attacks might occur anywhere in the food supply chain, they are usually focused on a specific food item, process, or business. The best way to protect food is to make it as difficult as possible for someone to tamper with it. So a food defense program should deal with the points in your operation where food is at risk. The FDA has created a tool that can be used to develop a food defense program. It is based on the acronym A-L-E-R-T, ALERT, and it can be used to help you identify the points in your operation where food is at risk. Let's take a closer look at what each letter in the acronym stands for. The A stands for Assure. It includes things like making sure that the products you receive are from safe sources, supervising product deliveries, and using approved suppliers who practice food defense. Oh, and you also should be requesting that delivery vehicles be locked or sealed. The L stands for Look, and it focuses on monitoring the security of products in the facility. How do you do that? Well, for starters, you should be limiting access to prep and storage areas. Locking them is one way to do this. Other steps you can take include creating a system for handling damaged products, storing chemicals in a secure location, and training staff to spot food defense threats. The E is for employees. It's a reminder that you should always know who's in your facility at any given time. So take the time to identify all visitors and verify credentials. When it comes to staff, it's a good idea to conduct background checks and take steps to limit access to prep and storage areas. The R is for reports, and the focus here is on keeping information related to the food defense accessible. That includes documents like receiving logs, office files, staff files, and random food defense self-inspections. Finally, the T stands for threat, and before one actually occurs, you should identify what you will do and who you will contact if there is suspicious activity or a threat at your operation. Be prepared to hold any product you suspect to be contaminated. Should a problem occur, contact your regulatory authority immediately. Maintaining an emergency contact list will make this easier. And there you go. A-L-E-R-T. Alert.
So far, we've looked at a lot of ways to make sure that nothing goes wrong in your facility. But even in the best operation, unexpected circumstances could result in a foodborne illness outbreak. There are some steps that you should consider if you ever need to respond to an outbreak. Here's your question. Which steps should you take if a customer complains that they are suffering from a foodborne illness caused by your operation? Nice, that's right. Let's take a look at how to handle something like this. After receiving a customer complaint of foodborne illness, you'll want to gather more information. Get the person's contact information and ask them what they ate. You should also ask them for a description of what symptoms they experienced and when they first became sick. And if you suspect that there is an outbreak, go ahead and contact your local regulatory authority and let them know. Segregate any of the product that is suspected in the potential outbreak, if any is left. Label it with "Do not use" and "Do not discard." Document any information that you have about the suspected product. This might include the product description, production date, and lot number. You'll also want to record the sell-by date and the pack size. Another important task is to identify all staff who were working at the time of the suspected contamination. These staff members may be subject to interviewing and sampling by investigators. Management should also immediately interview staff about their health status. Cooperate with the regulatory authorities for the investigation. Provide them with any appropriate documentation. They may ask for things like temperature logs, HACCP documents, staff files, that kind of thing. And then review food handling procedures to see if any standards aren't being met or if procedures aren't working. Let's move on to food allergens. It seems like we hear more and more about them every year, and understanding them is important for every restaurant and food service manager. Food allergens are a big deal. Let's start at the beginning with food allergens. That's allergen, ending with an N, not allergy. Any idea what a food allergen is? That's the one. A food allergen is a protein in a food or ingredient that some people are sensitive to. Here's how food allergies work. Allergic reactions are caused by proteins called allergens, and some types of food contain these allergens. The proteins occur naturally. Dairy products, for example, contain milk allergens, and some people are allergic to certain types of food that contain specific allergens. If they eat enough of that allergen, their immune system mistakenly considers it harmful and attacks the food protein. This can result in an allergic reaction, and that can be pretty bad. Because of this, you have to make sure that you keep this food away from these people. There are specific signs that a customer is having an allergic reaction. You should be able to recognize these signs and know what to do. Now, depending on the person, an allergic reaction can happen just after the food is eaten or several hours later. This reaction could result in some or even all of these symptoms, including nausea, wheezing or shortness of breath, hives or itchy rashes, swelling of various parts of the body, including the face, eyes, hands, or feet, itchy throat, vomiting, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. Sounds pretty bad, doesn't it? At first, the symptoms of an allergic reaction may be mild, but they can become serious quickly. In severe cases, it can lead to anaphylaxis. That's a severe allergic reaction that can lead to death. If a customer is having a severe allergic reaction to food, call the emergency number in your area and inform them of the situation. Allergic reactions are caused by particular food items. Got it. But which ones do managers need to be aware of? There are more than 160 food items that can cause allergic reactions. Let's go over them. No, of course, I'm kidding. Out of all of these items, just 8 account for 90% of all reactions in the United States. These are called the Big 8, hence that really big 8 on your screen. Both you and your staff need to know what the Big 8 are and which dishes on your menu contain them. The Big 8 allergens include milk, eggs, soy, fish such as bass, flounder, and cod, tree nuts such as walnuts and pecans, peanuts, crustacean shellfish such as crab, lobster, and shrimp, and wheat.
Let's apply what we just saw. Does pecan pie contain a Big 8 allergen? Great job. As its name implies, pecan pie contains pecans, which are tree nuts, and a Big 8 allergen. How about this cottage cheese? Yep, cottage cheese contains milk, which is a Big 8 allergen. What about sliced tomatoes? That's right. Sliced tomatoes do not contain a Big 8 allergen. Last one. Does this plain omelet contain a Big 8 allergen? It sure does. Omelets contain eggs, which are a Big 8 allergen. Nice job.
Okay, so we've covered the basics. Now it's finally time to go over some of the things that you can do to prevent allergic reactions to food in your operation. 15 million Americans have a food allergy, and allergic reactions result in 200,000 emergency room visits every year. Both service staff and kitchen staff need to do their parts to avoid serving food containing allergens to these customers. These policies would also apply to addressing food sensitivities that a customer might mention, such as a gluten intolerance. An important first step to keep guests with food allergies safe is quite simple. Know what's in the products that you buy. And the food labels on those products are a critical tool to identify allergens in the operation. Federal law requires manufactured products containing one or more of the Big 8 allergens to clearly identify them on the ingredient label. The allergen may be included in the common name of the food, such as buttermilk, or it may be shown in parentheses after the ingredient. Often, allergens will be shown in a contains statement. So what does this all mean? Well, when a customer says they have a food allergy, you have to take that seriously. Your staff need to be able to answer questions about menu items that contain potential allergens, and they should also know how to prevent cross-contact, which we'll go over. At a minimum, have one person available per shift to answer customers' questions about menu items. Let's watch and see how one server handles a customer with a food allergy. Listen to how the server handled an allergen special order, and then decide if the server did the right thing to prevent an allergic reaction.
A guest told me that he had a dairy allergy and wanted to know if the chicken salad had any dairy in it. I was honest and let him know that I wasn't totally certain, but it was probably fine.
Right. This server made a mistake when he said it was probably fine. Servers must be able to describe how a dish is prepared. Sauces, marinades, and garnishes often contain allergens. For example, peanut butter is sometimes used as a thickener in sauces or marinades, and that information is critical to a customer with a peanut allergy. Servers should also suggest menu items that they are certain do not have food allergens. Listen to this next one and answer the same question. Did the server do the right thing to prevent an allergic reaction this time?
The customer with the dairy allergy asked me if the barbecued chicken was safe for him to order. That's our house specialty, and I let him know that the recipe was a secret, so I couldn't tell him.
You're right, and that's strike 2 for our server. He should have told the customer if any ingredients contain allergens, whether or not they're secret. Okay, our server isn't doing so well. Think he'll recover? Let's see.
Finally, the customer asked about the grilled chicken on wild rice. Now, I was positive that there was no dairy in that one, so I let him know. He ordered the grilled chicken, and I made sure I noted his allergy on the order. His friend ordered a cheeseburger.
Yep, our server may have started wobbly, but he got it right this time. Just as important, he remembered to clearly identify the allergen special order on the order ticket, which you should always do for a guest with a food allergy. The kitchen staff needs this information. Last one. Let's see how this one turns out.
When the order was ready, I confirmed with the kitchen that this was the allergen special order. Plus, I checked the plate to make sure there wasn't anything with any dairy on it. Then I hand-delivered the grilled chicken to the customer with the dairy allergy, and another server brought out the cheeseburger for his friend.
Now he's got it. First, he checked with the kitchen staff to make sure he was getting the allergen special order. And it's important for servers to make sure that no garnishes or other items containing the allergen touch the plate, which he did. Then the server hand-delivered the allergen special order to the guest, and this was done separately from the other food to prevent contact with allergens. Hey, guess what? We're almost done with food allergies. All that's left is to cover what kitchen staff need to know. Let's talk about cross-contact. When a food item containing an allergen comes in contact with another food item or food contact surface and their proteins mix, it's called cross-contact. So everything that touches cheese on a burger becomes contaminated and can cause an allergic reaction even if you remove the cheese itself. Obviously, this can be dangerous for guests with food allergies. Kitchen staff need to be aware of cross-contact and how to avoid it. Here's one example. If you cook shrimp in a fryer, that fryer oil now has shellfish allergens in it. And if you then cook chicken in the same fryer oil, well, that's cross-contact. The chicken has touched the shellfish allergens. And cross-contact can also happen when food touches surfaces, equipment, or utensils that have touched allergens. So, let's say a cook bakes peanut butter cookies on parchment paper, and then uses that same parchment paper for a batch of chocolate chip cookies. Well, that second batch of cookies has been in contact with peanut allergens. Bad news for someone with a peanut allergy. When staff are preparing an order for a customer with a known food allergy, they have to make sure the allergen is not transferred from a food containing the allergen to the customer's food. Even a small amount of contact can be bad. Here are some things that kitchen staff should do when preparing allergen special orders. First, check recipes and ingredient labels to make sure the allergen is not present. Second, wash, rinse, and sanitize cookware, utensils, and equipment before prepping the food, including food prep surfaces. Some operations even use a separate set of utensils just for allergen special orders. And third, make sure the allergen doesn't touch anything used to prepare the customer's food, including utensils, equipment, and gloves. You should also make sure that staff wash hands and change gloves before prepping their food, and use equipment assigned for prepping the allergen special order. That might mean using separate fryers and cooking oils when frying food for customers with food allergies. And finally, label food that is packaged on-site for retail sale. Name all major allergens and follow any additional labeling requirements. That's it! Now it's time for a few questions, and we are done with this module. Here we go.
First question. How does most contamination of food happen? That's right. Most contaminants get onto food and food contact surfaces by the way people handle them. What food is most commonly linked to sugar toxin producing E. coli? S-Tech. That's right. Sugar toxin producing E. coli is most commonly linked with raw and undercooked ground beef. What is the most important way to prevent a foodborne illness from viruses? You got it. Practicing good personal hygiene is the most important way to prevent foodborne illness from viruses. What is the most important way to prevent a foodborne illness from biological toxins? Yes, that's correct. Purchasing from approved, reputable suppliers is the most important way to prevent a foodborne illness from biological toxins. A prep cook stores a bottle of sanitizer on a shelf above a prep table. To prevent chemical contamination, what should be done differently? That's correct. To prevent chemical contamination, store chemicals away from food prep areas, storage areas, and service areas. To prevent the deliberate contamination of food, a manager should know who is in the facility, monitor the security of products, keep information related to food security on file, and know what? That's right. Maintaining an emergency contact list is recommended by the FDA as part of the alert system. What steps should be taken if a manager suspects a foodborne illness outbreak? That's right. You should set aside the suspected product and mark it with "Do not use" and "Do not discard." What should food handlers do to prevent food allergens from being transferred to food? That's right. Correctly cleaning and sanitizing utensils will remove allergens and prevent them from getting on food the next time they are used. Nice work.